Have you ever wondered why two people, starting with the same opportunities, end up in completely different worlds? One struggles, always chasing after bills, while the other steadily builds a life of abundance, power, and freedom. It is not luck. It is not simply talent. And despite what motivational speakers may sell you, it is not about waking up at 5 in the morning or repeating affirmations in the mirror. The real difference is hidden in the way they decide. Every day you are faced with choices, some small, like whether to scroll on your phone or read a few pages of a book. Others larger, like how you spend your money or how you confront conflict at work. These micro-decisions shape the architecture of your destiny. And yet most of us make them unconsciously, like passengers on autopilot. We are trained to think short-term, to seek comfort, to avoid risk. But here lies the disturbing truth. This unconscious mode of living is precisely what keeps millions of people trapped in mediocrity. Now imagine this. What if you could enter the mind of a Renaissance strategist, someone like Machiavelli, and borrow his sharp, disciplined lens for your daily choices? Machiavelli observed rulers, merchants, and warriors of his time, and he saw that wealth and power were not born of chance, but of ruthless clarity in decision-making. Every act was calculated not for the immediate pleasure it gave, but for the long-term strength it built. This is not about becoming a cold manipulator of people. It is about reclaiming the lost art of discipline in thought, of approaching life not as a victim of circumstances, but as a designer of outcomes. What if starting today you decided as a millionaire decides, not because you already have millions, but because such a mindset is the soil from which wealth eventually grows? Here is where this journey begins. The 10 codes of wealth. These are not mystical secrets, nor are they shortcuts. They are mental disciplines that have guided thinkers, leaders, and builders across history. As you hear them, you may feel both resistance and recognition, because deep down you already know your decisions are shaping your life. The only question is, will you keep deciding like everyone else? Or will you dare to think like a millionaire? And before we go further, I want to hear from you. What do you believe is the single hardest decision to make daily? The one that quietly determines your future? Leave it in the comments, and let's begin unraveling these hidden codes together. What if you woke up tomorrow and every choice you made, every single one, was filtered through the question, does this make me stronger, or does this make me weaker? Imagine how different your day would unfold. Would you still waste 40 minutes arguing online? Or would you use that time to sharpen a skill? Would you buy something to impress others, or invest in something that multiplies your options for the future? Most of us live as if our decisions are isolated events disconnected from one another. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every choice is a seed, and the life you see around you today is nothing more than the harvest of yesterday's seeds. If you don't like your current reality, it is not because the universe is against you. It is because your past decisions have been too cheap, too comfortable, too unconscious. This is not a moral judgment. It is simply mathematics of the human condition. Now let me ask you, what if you began making choices as if you were already wealthy, powerful, and disciplined? Not because you want to fake success, but because the identity you embody shapes the reality you eventually live. Millionaires do not wake up one morning and suddenly become disciplined. They practice discipline in the small, invisible decisions long before anyone else notices their results. That is the seed. Picture yourself in 2 parallel timelines. In the first, you keep living as you always have, saying yes to convenience, yes to distraction, yes to fear of risk. In 10 years, you wake up and realize you've been running in place. In the second timeline, you start asking the difficult question every day. Does this align with the life I want? That single filter applied daily compounds into decisions that build wealth of character, clarity of mind, and eventually financial freedom. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Fortune does not favor the strongest army or the largest kingdom. It favors the ruler who has the courage to make decisions aligned with a long-term vision. Wealth in this sense is not an accident, but a predictable outcome of disciplined choice-making. So I invite you to close your eyes for a moment. Visualize your life 5 years from now, if every decision from this day forward was guided by clarity instead of impulse. What would you build? Who would you become? And most importantly, Why haven't you started yet? This is the power of the what if. It forces you to imagine a self you know is possible, but one you've been postponing. We grow up surrounded by a silent agreement about how life should be lived. Work hard, follow the rules, avoid risk, and eventually, you'll be rewarded. But here's the disruptive truth. This story is a lie. The majority who follow it end up exhausted, dependent, and confused, wondering why the promised reward never arrived. If you want to understand the codes of wealth, you must first shatter this illusion of normality. Think about it. If the common path really worked, wouldn't most people already be free, secure, and fulfilled? Instead, look around. How many of your friends and colleagues are truly at peace with their finances, their choices, and their futures? The uncomfortable answer is almost none. The reason is simple. Society trains us to think like servants, not like rulers. We are taught to obey, to fit in, to seek comfort. Yet millionaires are not born from obedience. They are born from discipline that often looks rebellious. Here's the paradox. What most people call safe is actually dangerous. Staying in a job you hate for decades feels safe until you realize you've traded your prime years for a retirement that may never come. Buying things to look successful feels satisfying until you discover you've built a life of invisible chains, debts and obligations that quietly own you. Normality is the trap. Discipline is the escape. Machiavelli saw this clearly in his time. He wrote that people are quick to accept appearances because appearances cost nothing. But the wise ruler looks beneath the surface, acting on what is real, not on what is comfortable to believe. That principle applies today more than ever. Most of us live according to appearances, what others expect, what feels convenient, without realizing that every small surrender is shaping a mediocre destiny. So here is the rupture point. You cannot keep deciding like the majority and expect to live like the minority. If you want uncommon results, you must embrace uncommon thinking. This means asking yourself uncomfortable questions every day. Am I choosing this because it's easy or because it's right for my future? Am I moving toward freedom or toward dependence? The third code of wealth begins here, with the courage to break from normality. Because once you see the illusion for what it is, you can never return to living asleep. And that awakening, though uncomfortable, is the first true act of freedom. Whenever we speak of wealth and power, it is tempting to dismiss it as something reserved for the lucky few, as if destiny chose them and forgot the rest of us. But history proves otherwise. Look at the lessons of Niccolo Machiavelli, who lived during the turbulence of Renaissance Italy, a world where kingdoms rose and fell not by chance, but by the discipline of rulers who knew how to decide. Machiavelli observed princes and generals, merchants and bankers, and he distilled one truth that still echoes today. Fortune favors those who act with clarity and discipline, not those who wait for chance. Consider his most famous work, The Prince. While often misunderstood as a manual for manipulation, at its heart it is about the sober discipline of decision-making. Machiavelli warned rulers not to depend on luck or the goodwill of others. Instead, he urged them to cultivate virtù, a strength of character, a disciplined mind capable of bending circumstances to one's advantage. Does this sound familiar? It is the same mental posture every millionaire must adopt, not waiting for perfect conditions, but shaping conditions through bold and deliberate choices. And this is not just Machiavelli. Modern psychology confirms it. Studies on decision-making show that the brain seeks shortcuts, relying on habits and emotions rather than rational analysis. Most people live trapped in this default mode, making impulsive choices that feel comfortable in the moment but destructive in the long run. But those who build wealth learn to slow down, to discipline their minds, to filter impulses through a long-term vision. In other words, they practice what Machiavelli called virtù without even knowing it. This is why figures across history, whether Marcus Aurelius in Rome, Benjamin Franklin in America, or Warren Buffett today, speak in different words of the same principle. Wealth begins not in the bank, but in the mind. It is born from disciplined thought, from the willingness to act strategically rather than emotionally. Here is the shift. The authority of history, philosophy, and science converge on a single point. You already possess the ability to think and decide differently. You do not need permission. You do not need to wait. The discipline that builds wealth is not reserved for an elite few. It is a practice, repeated daily, available to anyone courageous enough to commit to it. And so we arrive at the question Machiavelli would demand of us. Are you waiting for fortune to change, or are you preparing yourself to master it? Have you ever felt as if you were working harder than ever, yet somehow staying in the same place? That quiet frustration you carry is not a coincidence. It is the result of hidden patterns, subtle forces shaping your decisions without you even noticing. These are the invisible chains that bind ordinary people to ordinary outcomes. Let's name them. First, there is the chain of impulse. You feel stressed, so you buy something you don't need. You feel tired, so you choose distraction over discipline. The relief is immediate, but the cost is long-term. Second, there is the chain of fear. Opportunities appear, but you say no because the risk feels overwhelming. You tell yourself you are being realistic, but in truth, you are obeying fear disguised as wisdom. Third, there is the chain of approval. You make choices not because they align with your future, but because they keep you accepted in the eyes of others. Comfort, safety, belonging, these are powerful forces, but when they dominate, they quietly rob you of freedom. Now here's the disturbing part. These chains feel normal. They feel like just the way life is. Society reinforces them, friends echo them, and eventually you stop questioning them. But deep down, you know something is wrong. You know there is a quiet voice inside that says, "This is not the life I was meant to live." Machiavelli would call these forces illusions of control. He observed that most people live reacting to appearances, never realizing they are enslaved by them. A ruler who mistakes appearances for truth, he warned, will lose power. The same applies to you. If you mistake impulses, fears, and approval for genuine freedom, you will live trapped in a prison without walls. The breakthrough comes when you learn to name these invisible chains. Because once you can name them, you can confront them. Every time you pause before a purchase, before a decision, and ask, "Am I being ruled by impulse, fear, or approval?" you weaken the chains. This is the essence of discipline. It is not about denying yourself joy. It is about refusing to be enslaved by forces you do not see. So reflect honestly. Which invisible chain pulls you the hardest right now? Impulse, fear, or approval? Naming it is the first strike of the hammer that begins to break it. There are moments when a single phrase, spoken at the right time, pierces through the fog of confusion and stays with you forever. Millionaire thinking is filled with these sharp declarations, short, almost brutal truths that cut away excuses. They are not motivational slogans. They are reminders, weapons against self-deception. Let me share a few. Comfort is more expensive than discipline. Think about that. Every time you choose ease over effort, you pay a hidden tax. You may not see the cost today, but in a year, 5 years, 10 years, it compounds. Comfort feels cheap, but it is the most expensive decision you can make. If I do not rule my impulses will rule me. This is not philosophy. It is biology. Your brain is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. If you let this mechanism lead your life, you become predictable, controllable, ordinary. Discipline is not suppression. It is sovereignty over yourself. Wealth is not built by what you earn, but by what you refuse to waste. Most people chase higher income without realizing they are leaking value through mindless spending, wasted hours, and scattered focus. Millionaire decisions often look boring from the outside, saying no to trends, ignoring status games, choosing long-term over short-term. But those boring decisions are the bricks of freedom. Notice how each phrase is not just a statement, it is a mirror. When you repeat them, you feel confronted. They expose the gap between how you wish to live and how you actually live. That discomfort is good. It is the beginning of change. As Machiavelli would remind us, men often deceive themselves with illusions, and the ruler's task is to cut through illusion with clarity. These declarations are the modern sword of clarity. Now here's your challenge. Choose one declaration and carry it with you for the next 7 days. Write it on a paper, keep it on your phone, repeat it in moments of weakness. Watch how it reframes your decisions. When you are tempted by comfort, or impulse, or the desire to impress, recall the phrase. It will sting at first, but over time it will strengthen you. So let me ask, which declaration struck you the hardest today? Share it in the comments, because your choice may become the phrase that saves someone else from their illusion. At first glance, the pursuit of wealth seems simple. Accumulate as much as possible, protect it, and then enjoy it. But here lies the paradox. The very act of clinging to wealth often destroys it, while the courage to risk, to invest, and to let go is what allows it to grow. The path to freedom is not built on hoarding, but on disciplined boldness. Machiavelli observed this tension in the rulers of his time. Those who tried to play it safe, avoiding conflict or avoiding risk, often lost everything because their hesitation invited stronger forces to overtake them. On the other hand, those who dared to act decisively, even at the cost of short-term loss, often secured greater power in the long run. In his words, fortune favors the bold, but boldness without discipline is recklessness. Discipline without boldness is stagnation. True wealth requires both. This paradox is not only financial, it is psychological. Many people chase freedom through security. They save, they cling, they avoid risks. But eventually, security becomes its own prison. They cannot leave the job they hate because they fear losing their steady income. They cannot invest in an idea because they fear wasting savings. They cannot change cities, careers, or relationships because they fear stepping into the unknown. In trying to protect themselves, they end up trapped in a cage of their own making. On the other side are those who gamble recklessly, chasing shortcuts, throwing away discipline in the name of quick success. They burn out, collapse, and often lose more than they gain. Neither extreme leads to true wealth. The millionaire mindset lives in the paradoxical middle, the courage to risk, anchored in the discipline of strategy. Imagine this dual lens. Every decision you make should have both a warrior's boldness and an architect's patience. You take the risk, but it is measured. You invest, but not blindly. You act, but always with the awareness of long-term consequence. That balance, uncomfortable and demanding, is the soil where wealth grows. So ask yourself, where in your life have you been clinging too tightly, mistaking safety for strength? And where have you been reckless, mistaking impulse for courage? Identifying both sides of this paradox is the key. Because wealth in its truest form is not about what you hold, it is about what you dare to build and what you have the discipline to protect. We often think of discipline as a burden, a restriction that steals joy from life. But this is another illusion. The truth is that discipline does not take away freedom. It creates it. The small sacrifices you make today are not losses. They are investments that multiply your options tomorrow. And this is the hidden reward that millionaires understand better than anyone else. Think of the person who chooses to save rather than spend impulsively. In the moment, they appear deprived. They say no when everyone else says yes. But a few years later, while others are drowning in debt, this same person has freedom. Freedom to invest, freedom to say no to jobs they hate, freedom to walk away from toxic situations. What once looked like restriction has quietly transformed into power. Machiavelli saw this same truth in the rulers of his time. A prince who indulged in luxury, who always sought the easiest path, became weak and vulnerable. But the one who practiced restraint, who built strength and resources in silence, was prepared for storms that destroyed others. Discipline in his eyes was not punishment, it was survival. And beyond survival, it was dominance. Now, apply this to your own life. Every time you resist an impulse, every time you say no to distraction, every time you choose long-term vision over immediate gratification, you are not losing pleasure, you are gaining strength. You are practicing the art of becoming unshakable. And wealth, whether financial or personal, is built on that foundation of unshakability. The emotional reward is equally powerful. Discipline brings confidence. When you know you can trust yourself to follow through, anxiety begins to dissolve. The fear of the unknown shrinks because you realize you are prepared to face it. In other words, discipline transforms your relationship with yourself. It is not about controlling your life. It is about finally becoming someone you can rely on. So here is the invitation. Instead of asking, "What do I have to give up to be disciplined?" start asking, "What freedom will this act of discipline buy me later?" That single shift in perspective changes everything. Because the reward of discipline is not only the life you build, it is the person you become. And that person is far richer than money alone could ever make you. By now, you may have noticed something. Each code of wealth is not a random piece of advice, but part of a deeper structure. There is a framework that ties them together, a philosophy that explains why these principles work across centuries, cultures, and contexts. To understand it, we must step back and see the architecture behind the ideas. At the core of this framework is a simple equation. Identity shapes decisions, and decisions shape destiny. Most people try to change their lives by changing external circumstances, earning more, moving cities, finding different jobs. But they ignore the foundation, their identity, the inner lens through which they interpret the world. If you see yourself as powerless, every decision you make will reinforce that powerlessness. If you see yourself as disciplined and strategic, your choices will naturally align with growth and strength. This echoes what psychology calls self-concept theory, the idea that we act in ways consistent with who we believe we are. And it echoes Machiavelli's principle of virtue, the cultivated strength of character that allows a ruler to shape his fortune. In both, the hidden truth is the same. External wealth is a mirror of internal discipline. Here is how the framework unfolds. Perception. How you see yourself and the world defines your options. Decision. Every choice filtered through perception either reinforces weakness or builds strength. Repetition. Decisions repeated become habits. Habits solidify into character. Outcome. Over time, character writes the story of your destiny. This is why two people can face the same opportunity and end up with completely different results. It is not luck. It is not fate. It is the framework at work, silently shaping their lives. And here's the liberating part. You are not locked into the framework you inherited. You can rewrite it. By reshaping your identity, by practicing the mental discipline of seeing yourself as someone capable, strategic, and free, you alter the chain reaction at the very root. Decisions shift, habits shift, character shifts, destiny shifts. So when we speak of the 10 codes of wealth, what we are really describing is a philosophy of life, a way of seeing yourself not as a passive player, but as an active designer. This is the foundation that holds all the codes together. Without it, they are just tips. With it, they become transformation. We began with a question. Why do some people rise to wealth and freedom while others remain trapped in struggle? Across these 10 codes, the answer has revealed itself. Wealth is not a matter of luck, nor is it the privilege of the chosen few. It is the result of disciplined decisions repeated daily, guided by a clear identity and long-term vision. Machiavelli showed us that fortune bends not to the passive but to the prepared, to those with virtue, the cultivated strength of mind and will. Psychology has confirmed the same truth. Identity shapes behavior. Behavior shapes destiny. And your life today is already the sum of the choices you made yesterday, which means your life tomorrow depends on the choices you begin making today. The 10 codes are not abstract rules. They are living disciplines. Naming your invisible chains, rejecting the illusion of normality, embracing paradox, and declaring truths that keep you sharp. They are the art of aligning your daily decisions with the life you claim to want. And here lies the challenge. Will you keep this as an interesting idea, or will you test it in the battlefield of your own life? Because the real reward is not money alone. It is freedom. Freedom to walk away from what no longer serves you. Freedom to design your life instead of drifting through it. Freedom to stand in front of the mirror and know you are not a slave to impulse, fear, or appearances. That freedom is priceless. And it begins with the smallest, quietest decisions you make today. So here is my final invitation. Take one of these codes and apply it before the day ends. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Make one disciplined decision that your future self will thank you for. It might feel small, but it is a seed, and seeds compound into forests. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of the 10 codes struck you the deepest? Which one do you feel ready to apply in your life starting today? Share it in the comments, not just for yourself, but because your words might ignite the same awakening in someone else. If this journey has challenged you, inspired you, or even unsettled you in the best way, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Together, we are not chasing comfort. We are reclaiming discipline, reclaiming freedom, and learning to decide. Not as ordinary men, but as millionaires of the mind.